I am Mateo, and technically I turned 18 several months ago, or at least that was the date on the calendar. My parents, however, didn't really allow that milestone to take root. The day that was supposed to mark my ascension into adulthood, my first breath of true freedom, ended up being the night the tectonic plates of my family finally shifted, creating a chasm between me, my brother, and the people who raised us that could never be bridged again. To understand the end, you have to understand the beginning. I grew up in a home that functioned less like a family unit and more like a shrine dedicated to the worship of my older brother, Gabriel. He was 2 years my senior, the gifted one, the golden boy, the future neurosurgeon. At least that was the narrative my mother, Elena, spun for anyone who would stand still long enough to listen. Every time a friend or a distant relative crossed our threshold, she would orchestrate the conversation to highlight Gabriel's grades or how he had sacrificed a single Saturday to volunteer at the hospital, an event that happened exactly once, yet was recounted as if he were a saint walking among mortals. My father, Ricardo, was no better. He would beam with a blinding, terrifying pride every time Gabriel so much as walked into a room. Meanwhile, I was the background noise. I was the quiet kid who found solace in the scratch of charcoal on paper, in the pages of worn novels, and in the silence of my own company. The dynamic was simple. If Gabriel brought home an A, we went to a steakhouse. If I brought home an A, I was told, "Good job, mijo," before the spotlight swung back to the golden sun. At first, I didn't resent it. I told myself this was simply the physics of families. Some stars burn brighter, some kids are more charismatic, more worthy of being seen. But as the years accumulated, the disparity became a physical weight. When I was 16, I saved every peso I could scrounge for months to buy a secondhand acoustic guitar. I wanted to learn music, to perhaps study the theory of sound one day. I remember the afternoon I brought it home, my heart hammering against my ribs, showing the instrument to my mother with a smile so wide it hurt. She glanced at it, her brow furrowing in a look of mild distaste, and said, "That's nice, Mateo, but you should really focus on something practical, like your brother." That sentence, "like your brother," became the ghost that haunted the hallways of my mind. Gabriel was the sun. I was merely the shadow that proved his light existed. Still, I armored myself with patience. I worked after school at a small local grocery store, hoarding every cent, keeping my head down, staying out of trouble. I convinced myself that the magic number was 18.
When I turned 18, the world would have to treat me like an adult. I had even planned a modest celebration. Nothing extravagant, just dinner at my favorite diner with 3 close friends. I was paying for it myself. But 2 days before the date, Elena sat me down in the living room. She wore that specific expression she reserved for delivering bad news, a mask of faux concern. Gabriel was sprawled across the leather sofa, scrolling through his phone, looking bored. "Mateo," she began, her voice dripping with a sickly sweetness, "we've been thinking, maybe it's best if you don't do a big celebration this year." I blinked, the words not computing. A big celebration? Mama, it's just burgers with friends. I'm paying for the reservation. She sighed, a sound that implied I was being incredibly difficult. "It's not about the money, cariño. It's just, your brother has been feeling very down lately. He didn't get into his first choice medical school, and we don't want to make him feel worse by, well, making a big spectacle of your birthday right now." I actually laughed. It was a dry, incredulous sound. "You're joking, right? You want to cancel my 18th birthday because Gabriel is sad he didn't get into college?" My father, Ricardo, lowered his newspaper, his eyes hard. "Watch your tone, son. Your brother is going through a crisis. You can celebrate later." Celebrate later, as if turning 18 was a library book you could renew. Gabriel didn't say a word. He just smirked at the screen of his phone, pretending he couldn't hear his parents erasing my existence to protect his ego. That night, I lay awake in the dark, replaying a highlight reel of neglect. Every birthday where his cake was bigger, every Christmas where I unwrapped socks and he unwrapped the latest technology. And now, even my transition to manhood wasn't mine to keep. The next morning, I tried to reason with them. "I've already told my friends I paid the deposit. It isn't fair to cancel now." Elena's voice sharpened into a blade. Life isn't always fair, Cariño. You should be more understanding. Gabriel is your brother. Don't you care about how he feels? That question hit me like a physical blow, because I did care. I had always cared, but the affection was a one-way street. Gabriel had never once dimmed his shine for my sake. I skipped breakfast and went for a long walk in the biting February cold. The sky was a slate gray, mirroring the hollow feeling in my chest. When I returned, Elena was on the phone with Tia Sofia, bragging about how mature I was for agreeing to cancel the party. Gabriel was sitting at the kitchen island, eating pancakes, and he looked up at me with that smug, superior grin and said, "Guess I'm still the favorite," laughing as if it were the funniest joke in the world.
I didn't reply. I just turned around and walked to my room. That was the moment the shift happened. I realized I couldn't keep waiting for them to wake up and see me. They weren't blind. They simply chose to look away. So I started planning. Not for revenge, not yet, but for liberation. I went through my drawers, packing only the essentials. I tucked the rest of my savings, about $1,200, into the lining of my backpack. I spent the rest of the day performing normalcy. I smiled at dinner, laughed at Gabriel's inane jokes, and waited. When the clock struck midnight, technically the start of my birthday, I quietly walked out of the house. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it felt cleansing, real. I remember standing at the end of the driveway, looking back at that perfectly manicured house, and thinking, this is the last time you will ever take something from me. I found a cheap, drafty room to rent near the community college and doubled my shifts at the grocery store. It wasn't glamorous. My dinner was often instant noodles, and my furniture was non-existent. But for the first time, the air I breathed was my own. No guilt trips, no comparisons, no Gabriel. Weeks bled into months, and I built a life brick by brick. I saved enough to move into a slightly better studio apartment, started taking online courses, and poured my soul into teaching myself the guitar. Every milestone I hit, I felt a surge of gratitude that they weren't there to taint it. About a year later, the peace was shattered. It started with a text from Eliana. "Can we talk?" I ignored it. Then a message from Ricardo. "Your brother is having a tough time. Maybe you could help him out since you're doing so well now." That phrase, "doing so well," stopped me cold. How did they know? I hadn't spoken to them in a year. It turned out Gabriel had found my Instagram. He saw the photos of my apartment, my guitar, and the small but growing YouTube channel where I posted my music. He saw the comments from strangers validating my talent. For someone who had always been the sun, seeing his shadow thrive without him must have been agonizing. The next thing I knew, 3 short, impatient raps echoed on my door. The sound didn't ask for permission. It announced an invasion. When I opened it, Gabriel was standing there. He didn't say hello. He just looked past me, inspecting my sanctuary. "So," he said, stepping in without an invitation, "this is where you've been hiding?" "Hiding," I repeated. "I'm not hiding. I'm living." He scoffed, scanning the secondhand furniture and the dishes drying on the rack. "Not bad," he said, running a finger over my table to check for dust. "Kind of small, though." "It's mine," I said, my voice steady.
He juggled, "Independiente Mateo. Cute. I told Mama you'd come running back in a month." "Why are you here, Gabriel?" He dropped the grin. "Mom and Dad are worried. You just left. No note. You know how selfish that was?" The word selfish made my blood boil. Selfish? Like canceling my birthday because you were sad about a rejection letter? He frowned. "It wasn't like that." "It was exactly like that. You sat there eating pancakes while they erased my day for you." He shrugged, a gesture of supreme indifference. "It's not my fault they care about me more. You can't blame me for being the favorite." Hearing him admit it so casually was like pressing a thumb into a bruise. "Get out," I said. He smiled that infuriating smile. "Fine, but don't be surprised if Mama calls. She misses you." He left, but the intrusion had opened a door that wouldn't close. A week later, Elena appeared. She ambushed me as I was coming home from work, clutching a paper bag. She forced her way into my apartment, critiquing the decor, the size, the neighborhood. She unpacked leftovers, Gabrielle's favorites, claiming she brought them for me. "You know I don't eat lasagna," I said. "Everyone loves my lasagna," she dismissed, before launching into a monologue about how stressed Ricardo was and how hard Gabrielle was trying. Not once did she ask how I was. When she finally pivoted to me, it was a trap. "Your brother might want to move in with you for a while," she said casually, as if discussing the weather, "just until he gets back on his feet." I froze. What? "He needs a fresh start. You've managed to survive. Maybe you can set an example." "You cannot be serious." I stood up. "You want me to house him, the golden boy?" "Families help each other, Mateo." "You never helped me," I said, my voice rising. "I built this from nothing. You gave Gabrielle everything." "We gave you life," she snapped. "Don't be ungrateful." She left in a huff, but the pressure campaign was just beginning. Ricardo called, threatening that if I didn't help Gabrielle, I shouldn't expect their support when things go south. I hung up on him, realizing fully that I owed them nothing. But the universe wasn't done testing my resolve. A few days later, Gabrielle showed up with a suitcase. He tried to push past me. Mom said it was cool. My roommate kicked me out. I blocked the doorway. "No, absolutely not." "Come on, man, it's just a few weeks. I quit my job." "Of course you did. You're not staying here." His eyes narrowed. "You really think you're better than everyone now, big man with a YouTube channel? You're going to regret this." He snapped a photo of my apartment interior before storming off.
The fallout was immediate. The extended family began messaging me, calling me heartless. Gabriel had spun a story that I was living in luxury while letting him starve. I ignored them all and focused on my music. I secured a small sponsorship. I was winning. Then came the visitation. All three of them, Elena, Ricardo, and Gabriel, arrived at my door one evening. They pushed their way in, sitting in my living room like a tribunal. They demanded I come home. They claimed I was isolating myself and being prideful. "We helped you get started," Ricardo lied, his face stern. "That money in your account when you left, we transferred it. It's technically ours." "That was my grocery store money," I shouted, the gaslighting nearly suffocating me. "You wouldn't last a week without us," Gabriel sneered. I threw them out. I physically opened the door and demanded they leave. As they walked down the hall, Gabriel turned back and whispered, "Watch your back, little brother." 2 days later, my phone exploded. Notifications poured in. A video titled "The Truth About Mateo, the Liar Behind the Music" was trending. It was Gabriel. He used a distorted voice, but I knew his cadence. He showed screenshots, claimed I stole money from our parents, claimed I was faking my poverty for sympathy. He painted a masterpiece of lies. My reputation crumbled overnight. Brands dropped me, comments turned into a sea of hate. I called Elena. She admitted she knew. "He just wanted to tell his side of the story," she said weakly. I felt a betrayal so deep it scraped the bone. But the final blow came physically. I returned home from work to find my door jimmied open. My apartment was trashed, drawers emptied, and my guitar, my first guitar, was gone. On the counter sat a photo of us as children and a note in Gabriel's handwriting. "You should have stayed humble." The police could do nothing without footage. I sat in the wreckage of my life, the silence deafening. I had lost my family, my reputation, and my music. I felt I had hit rock bottom. But rock bottom is a solid foundation. I made a choice. I didn't scream. I didn't post a rant. I went dark. I deleted my social media. I created a new persona, Leo Norte. I bought a cheap backup guitar and started recording again, faceless, nameless. I poured the rage, the sorrow, and the betrayal into the lyrics. I worked 2 jobs, one at the grocery store, one at a cafe owned by a kind woman named Valeria, to survive. Months passed in silence. My family thought they had won. They thought I was broken. But Leo Norte was catching fire. A song I wrote called Casas de Vidrio, Glass Houses, went viral. It was raw and real, and people connected with the pain. I started making money,
real money. I signed a deal. I was rebuilding a fortress they couldn't see.
Then the invitation arrived. It was on thick, cream-colored paper. You are cordially invited to celebrate Gabriel's graduation and new career partnership. It was at my parents' house. A handwritten note from Elena. Please come. It would mean the world. I knew what it was. A victory lap. They wanted to parade me as the prodigal son returning to bow before the king. But they didn't know about Leo Norte. They didn't know I had leverage. I called Tia Sofia, my only ally. If you go, she said, make sure the truth comes out on your terms. I bought hidden lapel microphones and a pin camera. I walked into that house, not as a victim, but as a prosecutor. The party was in full swing. Banners, photos of Gabriel everywhere. When I entered, Elena hugged me too tight, performing for the audience. Gabriel saw me and smirked. Look who crawled back, he announced to his friends. Dinner was a theater of the absurd. Ricardo toasted Gabriel, then turned his gaze on me. We hear you're struggling, Mateo. Gabriel is starting a practice. He needs a partner, someone to invest. It's time you contribute to the family. Invest? I asked calmly. With what money? The money you claimed I stole. Don't be bitter, Gabriel said, leaning back, wine glass in hand. Aligning with me could help clean up your image. The internet never forgets, you know. You're right, I said, my voice cutting through the chatter. The internet doesn't forget. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the room's Bluetooth speaker system. I pressed play. Gabriel's voice, clear and undistorted from the raw file I had recovered from a cloud backup he was foolish enough to sync on our shared old family plan, filled the dining room. You should have stayed humble, little bro. Maybe this will teach you. The room froze. I pulled out the police report. And here is the report for the break-in. I didn't press charges because I pitied you, but you're still lying. This is fake, Gabriel stammered, his face draining of color. It's not, and neither is the lawsuit my lawyer prepared for defamation and theft. I showed them the legal documents on my screen. I'm Leo Norte, the musician you've been bragging about to your church friends. That's me, and I have the resources to bury you in court. I stood up. The silence was absolute. I'm not pressing charges today, but if you ever mention my name again, I will release everything. The video, the theft, the lies. I looked at Elena. You wanted me to be like Gabriel. I'm glad I disappointed you. I walked out. I drove away, leaving the house in chaos. The fallout was nuclear. Friends filmed the argument. It spread locally. Gabriel's job offer was rescinded when the partners heard the recording. The family reputation evaporated.
Weeks later, Gabriel came to my apartment in the rain. He was broken, small. He apologized, truly this time, because he had lost everything. I didn't offer forgiveness. I offered him a towel and told him to leave. I released a final song, 18, about the birthday that never was. It became an anthem for the unseen. I used the royalties to fund a shelter for teens kicked out of their homes. I finally celebrated my birthday properly. Just me, a few real friends, and a cake. When I blew out the candles, I didn't wish for anything. I had my freedom, and that was the only gift I ever needed. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever had to fight to be the main character in your own life, you know that the best revenge isn't anger, it's success. Don't let anyone write your story for you. Subscribe now for more stories of justice, resilience, and the power of walking away. Hit that like button if you believe the truth always wins.